As we begin, good morning and welcome. Grab a seat. Welcome to today's programming. Been looking forward to this for a while. The program committee has been planning it for a little bit, so we're excited. My name is Angelina Reyes, and I am the co-president of our wonderful league. We're pleased to have you this morning and for this very important presentation. We, first of all, would like you to silence your devices. And please be aware that the restrooms are located down the hall to the right. Thank you, Niles Discovery Church, for providing the use of your facility to conduct our programs. We appreciate that partnership. A little bit about the League. The League of Women Voters is a national organization that has been defending democracy for over 100 years. It was formed when courageous women stood up, fought for, and finally won the right to vote through the ratification of the 19th Amendment in 1920. Our local league, which represents the Tri-City area, has been active for more than 50 years. The league's mission, up here, is to encourage participation in government, increase understanding of major public policy issues, and to influence. Influence is such an important word. Women influence public policy through study, education, and advocacy. And move the slide. Oh, did I turn it off? Next. League's nonpartisan policy. It's important to note that we are a nonpartisan organization, and we never endorse or oppose a particular candidate or political party. And of course, once individuals are elected, they become our public servants, responsible for representing all their constituents, regardless of party affiliation. Holding elected officials accountable to the public interest is not a partisan act. It is a vital function of a healthy democracy. We are nonpartisan, but not neutral. We do not stay silent when democracy is under threat, voter access is restricted, or misinformation spreads. When these things happen, the League has a responsibility to speak out clearly and forcefully. That's it. So thank you for your attendance, and we look forward to this program. We hope that we all learned something this morning. Andrea.
Good morning. I'd like to introduce our speaker today, who's representing an organization called Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. Our programs for this year are on a particular theme called we call it Defending Our Democracy. And the First Amendment to the Constitution includes religious freedom. Camille Didelot, our speaker today, is a digital fundraising expert with a proven track record of helping nonprofits succeed and advance their social causes. Her passion for working with nonprofits started when she lived in New Orleans, where she went to a Jesuit university that incorporated social justice into its curriculum. Before joining Americans United, Camille developed digital strategies for a number of progressive organizations, such as the ACLU and International Planned Parenthood Federation. Camille is a dual citizen of the United States and France, and she's lived in both the US and Europe. And this gives her a unique perspective shaped by two traditions of separation of church and state: American religious freedom and French laïcité. Did I pronounce that right? That's my high school French. Okay. This cross-cultural experience deepened her understanding of how secular governance protects pluralism and individual liberty. Camille believes that the separation of church and state is fundamental to a just and equitable society. She's dedicated to AU, that's Americans United, the mission of protecting this essential principle and empowering people of all backgrounds to thrive. So I want you to welcome Camille.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for being here and spending your Saturday morning with me. Thank you, Andrea, for the introduction. My name is Camille Didelot, and I'm so happy to be with you all today speaking about my organization, Americans United for Separation of Church and State, and our work to protect this country's promise of religious freedom. I want to take a moment and say that all of us at AU really admire the work that the League of Women Voters does to defend democracy through protecting our right to vote. I have a colleague who's very involved in the Long Island chapter. So thank you again for letting me be here today. And today I'm going to be breaking down a few things. AU's mission and vision, first and foremost, what actually is the separation of church and state, and the heavier part will be we call it the existential threat to our democracy, which is Christian nationalism. We'll then talk about how AU is fighting back and how you can support our movement and our mission. And I know we'll have a Q&A at the end, so if you could save your questions till then, I'll be happy to answer them. Let's get started. All right, so you've heard me mention it a few times, but what is Americans United? Well, we are a 501c3, also nonpartisan, nonprofit who protects religious freedom for everyone. We bring people together of all religions and none to protect everyone's right to live as themselves and believe as they choose, as long as they do not harm others. We are the only organization that is dedicated solely to defending the separation of church and state. So for nearly 80 years, we have our 80th anniversary next year. AU has defended the pillar of our democracy, that is church-state separation. And for context, our origins date back to a US Supreme Court decision in 1947. That ruling violated the separation of church and state by extending public funds to religious schools, which is a topic we will come back to. A coalition of leaders from religious and educational communities met in Chicago to decide how to respond to this ruling. Some religious groups, after this happened, were already lobbying for more forms of tax aid. And so this coalition wanted to make sure that that door remained pretty tightly shut. So they decided to form a national organization that would educate the American people about the importance of church-state separation and advocate for that principle in the courts, in the legislatures, and in Congress. So Americans United for Separation of Church and State was then born. All right. Here's a little bit about what AU's vision is. As our name indicates, we see a nation where church and state remain separate. What that means is in this nation, everyone is free to live and believe as they choose. Our government does not favor any religion or spiritual belief or favor religion over non-religion. And very importantly, our laws do not allow anyone to use their religious beliefs to harm others. Finally, we come together as equals to build a stronger democracy. Sounds great, right? But how do we actually accomplish this ambitious vision? Well, there are three key parts to AU's work. Principally, we advocate. So we bring together all Americans of all religions and none to speak out for the freedom to live as ourselves and believe as we choose. Second, we change policy. So we fight for laws that prevent religion from being used to harm other people. And we take it to the courts. So we litigate against religious extremists and their lawmaker allies who are attacking religious freedom in America. There are some key parts of our work. It spans from fighting discrimination, so things like denial of health care, foster care discrimination, LGBTQ+ rights, equality, trans rights, to protecting religious minorities from mandated prayer or religious displays. One of my favorite parts about working for AU is that it covers so much ground of so many things that I care about. So I feel like I don't even need to pick one because church-state separation touches all of these areas. So I've been telling you, we protect church-state separation. It's in Americans United name. But I want to take a brief moment to really define what it is and where it came from. So the simple definition is that it ensures all people, whether they are religious or not, are treated the same. I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record. But it's an important part of our Constitution. Some people say that because the Constitution doesn't explicitly name separation of church and state word for word, that it's not a thing. But that could not be farther from the truth. The Constitution clearly establishes a separation between religion and government for a few reasons. First, our Constitution was the first to declare that power comes from the people and not from gods. So that was the first time this new source of power had really been declared. Second, our Constitution does not mention a god or deity and was the first to do so. And finally, our Constitution was the first to ban religious tests for public office. And then, to make it as clear as possible, the authors of the Constitution wrote the First Amendment and said, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. If you've heard of the Free Exercise Clause, that's where it comes from. All right, so we're gonna have a little engagement this morning. We're gonna play a true-false church-state separation edition. So first up, we have true or false. Laws cannot be based on lawmakers' religious beliefs. For example, lawmakers can't create abortion ban laws based on their own religious beliefs. Who believes that is true? Raise your hand. Who believes it's false? Can. It's true. It is true. The separation of church and state protects everyone's rights. We cannot force our beliefs on other people or discriminate against them simply because they believe differently than us. This is Rachel Lacer, our president and CEO. She's wonderful, giving us the thumbs up. We have one more question here. True or false, religion is banned in public schools. Students may not pray while at school. Who thinks it's true? Who thinks it's false? It's false. Students are welcome to pray and express their religious beliefs in public schools. What AU does is protect those students by ensuring that the public schools themselves remain inclusive and do not force anyone to take part in religious activities such as forced prayer or mandated Bible study. Right. Yes, exactly. All right. A common misconception that we encounter within our organization is that we are anti-religion, and that could not be farther from the truth. We were founded by people of faith, and we bring together people of all faiths and no religion. All of us, again, united in the belief that being treated equally under the law depends on the separation of church and state. We welcome religious Americans in our coalition, and we even have 2 pastors on staff, as well as a faith advisory council, a Faith Leaders United, who help us really network with clergy and faith communities to deepen the relationship with religious groups. So we are in no way opposed to religious practice. In fact, we really maintain that our work safeguards your right to believe. So our team is kind of the full rainbow of religion. It's a really wonderful group of people. All right. This leads me to our next part, where we will discuss the biggest threat that we believe our democracy faces today, which is Christian nationalism. So I will be going over what Christian nationalism is, its history, the threat it really poses today for all of us in our communities, and how AU is fighting back. We believe to achieve a society that values inclusion rather than exclusion, pluralism rather than fundamentalism, religious freedom rather than religious oppression, we must embrace the separation of church and state as the antidote to Christian nationalism. So what is Christian nationalism? It's an extremist political movement that believes in the lie that America was founded as and must remain a Christian country, and that our laws and policy must ensure that the right white Christians hold on to power and privilege. To be extremely clear, Christian nationalism is not the same whatsoever as Christianity. And in fact, many Christians oppose Christian nationalism. It is a fringe movement that misuses religion for political gains. There's even a Pew Research report from 2024 that says that the overwhelming majority of Americans said that the government should not declare Christianity as the official religion of our country. So it's a very nonpartisan belief. Okay, bear with me here. There's going to be some examples, a little dense, but I think it's important to talk about how Christian nationalists have amassed anti-democratic power over the past few decades. They have been building alliances with billionaires and political operatives. So I'm going to share a few examples of this. We have Leonard Leo. Perhaps you've heard of him. He is the co-chairman and former executive vice president of the Federalist Society. He maneuvered to stack the courts against abortion, contraception, and LGBTQ+ rights because he knew he could not win on those issues if public opinion prevailed. Leo's Marble Trust Freedom Fund has more than $1 billion in assets to fight, in his own words, the vile and immoral barbarians, secularists, and bigots who do not align with his vision of a Christian, radical Christian nation. Example 2, there is the Alliance Defending Freedom. They are self-described as a Christian law firm founded by televangelists and radio preachers who boast an annual revenue of over $100 million in 2022. It has been pursuing major court cases that attack reproductive freedom, LGBTQ+ rights, and claims to have crafted the model bill that was at the heart of Dobbs versus Jackson, which we know as the case that ended the constitutional right to abortion. And my final example, we have Russell Vought. Some, again, may have heard of him before. He is a self-professed Christian nationalist who was an architect of Project 2025, which is the 900-page playbook to dismantle our democracy. He now serves as the Director of Office of Management and Budget in the Trump administration, making him incredibly well-positioned to implement Project 2025's Christian nationalist agenda. Christian nationalism is not new by any means. It has been a theme throughout American history as white Protestants in power justified killing and displacing Native Americans, enslaving and lynching Black people, and excluding Catholic, Jewish, Asian, and other immigrants from our country. The Christian nationalist version of our history is that the United States is a perfect, God-given country, and that is what is used to justify our terrible and exclusionary history. We believe a really important part of fighting Christian nationalism is calling out the horrific reality that so many groups in our country have faced. So the more recent examples In the early 1940s, there was a political organizer who was known for his fascist and anti-Semitic beliefs. He launched the Christian Nationalist Crusade, the Christian Nationalist Party, and the America First Party to peddle the myth of America's Christian founding. During the Cold War in the 1950s, a wave of Christian nationalism resulted in "Under God" being added to the Pledge of Allegiance, "In God We Trust" being declared the national motto, and the creation of the National Day of Prayer. I didn't know that before I joined Americans United, that, "In God We Trust" was such a new addition. I thought it had been there since the beginning, but that's not true. And so the more modern Christian nationalist movement was very fueled by opposition to Brown versus Board of Education. The desegregation of public education was a big reason for where we are today. It was this watershed decision that really mobilized Christian nationalist preachers and politicians to join forces and select abortion as the wedge issue that would divide the electorate and help them win power. So this is really serious. I want to start by grounding this in something simple and clear, that we hear, in the news a lot of talk about Project 2025, right? It's a 900-page Christian nationalist playbook, but it's not just this dense policy document that has to do with the year 2025. It is a governing blueprint, and there was even a recently released Project 2026. I'm not sure if anyone saw. If implemented, Project 2025 would reshape daily life for so many communities that we live in and care about. So, starting with public education, Project 2025 calls for eliminating or hollowing out the U.S. Department of Education and dramatically reducing federal civil rights oversights. That means fewer guardrails ensuring that public schools serve all students. At the same time, it accelerates the diversion of public funds into private religious schools, schools that are not bound by the same anti-discrimination protections and can therefore teach narrow religious doctrine. So this isn't abstract. This is your neighbor's child, it's your child, your grandchild, students who are Black, disabled, LGBTQ+, who are losing federal protections that have been in place for decades. Healthcare is another example. Project 2025 embeds the belief that life begins at conception into federal policy. That means medication abortion, the most common form of abortion care in the United States, could be blocked nationwide, not just in the states. It also means that emergency protections under federal law could be weakened or stripped away. This is not a political talking point. That is, again, someone's daughter. It's me, it's you, it's someone in a medical crisis being told that ideology outweighs common sense medical judgment. Then we have LGBTQ+ rights. Project 2025 calls for rolling back federal enforcement of protections for LGBTQ+ in people in schools, healthcare, workplaces, social services. It promotes one narrow definition of what family is in federal programs, excluding families that do not conform to that extremely narrow vision. So again, imagine your friend, your cousin, a colleague being told that the federal government no longer sees your family as a family. And finally, we have anti-discrimination law itself. The blueprint proposes turning civil rights frameworks against diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, reframing attempts to address systemic racism as unlawful discrimination. In other words, these laws that are designed to expand opportunity could now be used to fully restrict it. So it's, we talk about what would happen, but how? How would all of this happen? Well, a few reasons. First, Project 2025 restructures government power. We saw it in action last year. Independent agencies are dismantled. The Department of Education is drastically reduced, and career civil servants are replaced with politically vetted loyalists. That concentrates power in Christian nationalist circles and removes crucial institutional guardrails. Second, it embeds one religious doctrine, again, into federal law, defining family through a narrow theological lens. Decisions that affect millions become dictated by ideology and not evidence. Third, civil rights protections are erased. LGBTQ+ protections vanish, anti-discrimination law is weakened, and diversity and equity programs that recognize the importance of diversity in our country could be defunded or dismantled. And fourth, public resources are redirected. Funding is funneled into private religious schools, free to discriminate, while public institutions then lose support. So taken all together, this is not incremental change. This is a systemic reshaping of our entire American society to reflect one ideological vision. And there's actually a tracker that keeps track of everything in Project 2025. And as of right now, just over half of it has been implemented already. Okay, this is really heavy, right? Something that makes me feel better is that Americans United exists to defend these protections in so many places, in the courts, in federal agencies, in legislatures, and in communities across the country. We challenge unconstitutional policies, hold officials accountable, and fight to make sure that our government serves everyone, not just those who adhere to one particular belief. This brings us to what we are doing right now to push back against Project 2025 and defend the freedoms and protections that every American deserves. So first, we're going to watch a video that sums up a little bit about what we're up against and how AU is fighting back.
I can't imagine a better life for us than as parents. I wanted to be able to have at least one biological child. Then we realized that a biological child wasn't an option for us. Then we decided to do the foster to adopt.
We started lining everything up.
So we found a child, a little boy in Florida. This one stood out to us. Unfortunately, as a Christian organization, our executive team made the decision several years ago to only provide adoption services to prospective adoptive families that share our belief system.
Liz just called me crying. Because we were Jewish, we weren't able to be parents. It was a gut punch. Our taxpayer dollars are going to foster care, yet we can't adopt a child through that system.
I know it's hard sometimes seeing any of your friends that have kids. You're happy for that person, but you also long for that.
Project 2025 is this voluminous 900-page document that the Christian Nationalist movement has come up with on how they're going to take over the United States, basically.
To know that Project 2025 recognizes what's happening and is supporting it, it's really hard to swallow.
It's really disheartening to see that there's entire political arms at this point hell-bent on trying to make us second-class citizens.
We know this is an injustice.
If Project 2025 can come for us, it can come for anyone. Americans United for Separation of Church and State. That kind of sounds like what we're trying to do right here.
They've been along with us for all the struggles and the ups and downs. They handle all the really complicated things that I don't always understand. We tell our story and they take care of it from there.
They're dedicated to the cause of not letting a theocracy be established.
Americans United has been a light for us in this difficult time.
We're still nervous, but at least we know we're not alone.
So you just heard from Liz and Gabe Rutenram of Knoxville, Tennessee. As you heard, they are our clients. We've been representing them since early 2022 after a taxpayer-funded foster care agency in their state, Holston Home for Children, told Liz and Gabe it would not provide the foster care training and certification they needed because they are Jewish, and the agency will only serve Christians. This is really just the tip of the iceberg on how the Christian nationalist agenda is impacting people's lives and what AU is doing about it. The threats are worse than ever now that Christian nationalists are in power and in a position to implement this horrific policy blueprint. So here's another example that's a big part of our work. It's reminiscent of AU's founding. So Christian nationalists have been peddling private school voucher programs to steer taxpayer dollars away from public schools that are open to all in the community. They want to put these funds towards private religious schools that claim the right to discriminate against families based on religion, gender, sexual orientation, ability, and other characteristics. AU's stance is unwavering on this. Public money belongs in public schools, not for vouchers for private religious schools. Taxes that are paid by all Americans of all religions and no religion should not be used for private religious education. And it's important to note that these private religious schools often turn away or expel children with disabilities, LGBTQ+ students, or students and families who simply do not adhere to the school's religious code of conduct. So last year, AU's policy team mobilized strong opposition to the effort to create the first ever nationwide federally funded private school voucher scheme. This bill proposed to divert $10 billion in taxpayer money annually from public schools to private, mostly religious schools. Families, whether religious or not, do not want this. We know that, and our policy team was able to really mobilize this strong opposition. And though looks like I'm missing a page here, but we were not able, unfortunately, to stop the bill itself. But a big difference that we made is that states are not forced to adopt this program instead of it being mandated federally for everyone. We had a big year in Oklahoma last year. It's really worth noting the major victories that we saw. The most important one, I think, is that we helped stop the nation's first religious public charter school at the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court deadlocked after the Oklahoma Supreme Court ruled that this public charter school was unconstitutional, and AU was able to dismiss its case against the Oklahoma Supreme Court to block this effort from happening. And then a few more things. We were able to block Superintendent Ryan Walters from implementing Trump Bibles in schools and prevent funding that way. And he also wanted to impose K through 12 Christian nationalist social studies standards that we also successfully blocked in court. After this 3-for-3 run, Superintendent Walters not only resigned, but the state leaders abandoned these initiatives. So this was a big deal last year because even under this administration, even in a state like Oklahoma, church-state separation can and will win. It's even in the places that you might not expect. A big case that we deal with are the 10 Commandments posted in public schools. You may have seen This is being mandated in Louisiana, in Arkansas, in Texas. We know that families, whether religious or not, do not want this. We have polling, we have numbers to prove it. We believe that families, not politicians, should choose if and when to engage in religious education or not. And some say, oh, well, the 10 Commandments, it's some rules to live by, but the version that they're wanting to implement is so much more than that. So in Louisiana, in Texas, and in Arkansas, Americans United is suing over these laws mandating these 10 Commandments displays in public school classrooms because they impose a certain version of religious texts on children, regardless of their family's religion or non-religion. So we really believe that this divides public school students along religious lines. It's also important to note that these laws blatantly violate a long-standing Supreme Court precedent from a 1980 case called Stone versus Graham, which is what Christian nationalists seek to overturn. We've had some key rulings in these cases, most recently a slightly unfortunate decision where basically the Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit needed more factual development before ruling. So our lawyers are figuring out the next step there, but on every local level, we have won against these 10 Commandments. And, you may know, but the purpose of these copycat laws in various states, you think, why would Arkansas do this when Louisiana, it was mandated not to? The goal is to get it all the way up to the Supreme Court. So Americans United is also fighting back against the Trump administration's Christian nationalist agenda at the federal level. AU went to court to defend the Johnson Amendment after the Trump IRS proposed a radical reinterpretation that would allow houses of worship, but not secular nonprofits, to endorse political candidates. That change would completely blur the line between church and state and open the door to partisan political campaigns that exploit the tax-exempt religious status. When the administration refused to defend the law, in our case, National Religious Broadcasters versus Bissent, or the case, our attorneys then stepped in an attempt to intervene and urged the court to reject the proposed settlement. And we're currently awaiting a ruling on this. At the same time, we are challenging the administration's broader push to weaponize religious liberty. We sued after federal agencies failed to comply with our Freedom of Information Act requests about the so-called anti-Christian bias task force. We've also been investigating, and as of about a month ago, are now suing Trump's Religious Liberty Commission. We believe those meetings resemble Christian nationalist rallies more than serious policy discussions, and so we are demanding transparency from the Department of Justice and other agencies. And finally, the Office of Personnel Management circulated guidance that could enable religious coercion in federal workplaces, such as a government doctor praying over their patients in hospitals or supervisors proselytizing employees. We responded with a Know Your Rights guide and formal warnings issued to 19 agencies. So across the board, we are using litigation, oversight, and public advocacy to defend genuine religious freedom and uphold church-state separation under the Trump administration. That's not all. We had a really remarkable year in 2025. Our team has been growing, therefore so has our impact, right? In addition to legal cases filed, amicus briefs, new lawsuits, active cases, we've made strides in the policy arena by tracking nearly 1,000 state bills. Our movement is really gaining strides. More people are engaged than ever, and our awareness is building with more media placements. We launched our influencer program to really help educate people about this issue. I also want to note that other than the state and the federal level, we do a lot of work locally. You can report a violation of church-state separation on our website, and every week we issue, legal letters warning, a small school in Arkansas whose fourth grade teacher is trying to force students to pray before class. We write letters and say, that is unconstitutional, you cannot do that, and it stops it in its tracks. So I think it's important to note the local, state, and federal level that we're fighting against. All right, we're a few months into the new year, and we are hitting the ground running. We've, again, filed lawsuits, amicus briefs, filed motions, joined coalitions, with this work happening all over the country. We are so determined to be the shield that protects this country's promise of religious freedom. As we like to say, in a country divided, we are Americans united. So what can we as individuals and as a community do to help? Well, you can support and join AU and take action. You can donate. As the League knows, we do rely on financial support from the community to do this work. But otherwise, you can attend events. We have a annual conference called the Summit for Religious Freedom that is taking place this spring at the end of April. There's a virtual option. You can sign up to volunteer. You can invite AU speakers like I'm here now. And if you know faith leaders or young people, we have a faith and youth program that they can get involved in. Otherwise, pay attention to the local news. The fight against Christian nationalism is not just happening in Congress and at the Supreme Court, as we discussed. It's happening in our local school boards, city council, and other municipal meetings, places where our voices can make a really big difference. So pay attention and get involved in local efforts that oppose Christian nationalism. You can also spread the message. Christian nationalists have co-opted and twisted the term religious freedom to mean religious liberty only for white Christian nationalists. So we really want to reclaim the term religious liberty for all Americans. So you can make a difference by spreading the message in your communities through public remarks like this, or social media, or just everyday conversations. I'm going to make a second plug for donations here as it's part of my role. So I am the digital fundraising manager at AU. My work involves reaching new and current supporters by developing our online fundraising strategy and creating compelling campaigns that really inform people about the work that we're doing. I always say to my colleagues, thank you for your incredible work. I get to brag about it. So maintaining and growing our donor base, especially our grassroots donors, is so important to make sure that AU remains capable for decades to come and continue this fight. We believe that, the fight against Christian nationalism is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and we need to be ready for the long haul because movements take decades. If you are interested in giving, there's so many different ways you can contribute. I have some copies in the outside of our magazine, Church and State, that you receive if you give any monthly donation or a one-time gift of $35 or more. So it's lovely to get that magazine and kind of have physical media to kind of keep up with the church-state separation fight. And of course, outside of monetary donations, there are so many ways to get involved. This is all on our website, but as I mentioned again, we have our Summit for Religious Freedom coming up. You can join in person or virtually. You can join our action network, or just help connect anyone in your life to our movement. I'm going to close with this. We live in really scary times, but I and everyone at Americans United really have hope, and my hope is with us, the people. The people have had successes against Christian nationalism in the past to destroy church-state separation, and the truth is, Christian nationalism is extremely unpopular against people of diverse religions. So church-state separation is a truly nonpartisan issue, much like the right to vote. So this means that we all have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to spread the word, to educate people, and to mobilize. You are all doing it so well already by helping protect our vital right to vote, but we also hope you consider joining our movement. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Camille. I just am so enlightened. I really had no idea. When I asked somebody from this organization to speak, I didn't really know the depth of what you're all about. So I think you enlightened all of us. And for the people that are here, it's time for questions and answers. We'll take microphones around. Joyce and I will take microphones around. So think of the questions that you have. And Camille, I guess you can stand back up and answer some of our questions.
I have a question about the slogans "Under God" and "In God We Trust." Is there any movement to remove those?
That's a good question. Not that we are aware of. Again, because kind of as I mentioned, it's not many know that it has been such a recent addition to our country. So I think we see greater parts of the fight than removing that, but it's certainly worth considering in the future.
I understand that in the armed forces, some of the commanders are now touting that Trump is a warrior for God and that the soldiers are fighting for him. Can you do anything about that?
Actually, on Friday, we have not seen factual, we've heard a lot of that, but we have not seen factual evidence yet. So on Friday, we actually discussed it as an organization. And as of right now, we are not until we see, proof. But it's certainly, depending on what happens, it's certainly something that we could consider litigating against. There's an organization called I believe it's the Military Religious Freedom. There's some sort of organization like that that's even more specific. But that's a great question because it's terrifying, and it just came up.
This is almost a follow-up question. Except just invited a pastor who calls for Christian theology to lead the Pentagon. And that was put on the Pentagon's television network for all troops to see. How can something like that be stopped in its tracks immediately? And the second question and follow-up is, what about the Supreme Court right now leaning to such a conservative Christian nationalist bent that I'm kind of concerned about that as well and what their judgment will be?
Excellent question. For the first part, I'm actually crafting our spring kind of fundraising campaign, and our opening message is exactly that. The Pete Hegseth pastor, we have a quote from him. So I think we are still understanding the implications behind that before taking action. We have so many lawyers at our company that we're very strategic and cautious, and we want to make sure we are approaching everything the strongest way possible. So as of right now, we're spreading awareness about it until we see a place where we can do something. And as soon as, if and when we can, we won't hesitate to take action. But right now, from my understanding, we are spreading awareness of it. If you sign up for our email list, you'll receive an email talking about it in about less than a month that I'm currently working on, because we are fully aware of how ridiculous it is. For the Supreme Court, this is such a tough one. We like to remind everyone that local power and local difference is so important. This Supreme Court is so disappointing, for lack of a better term, that we need to remind ourselves that change and, day-to-day impact happens on the local level and not the federal one. And we, time after time, again, we have won on the local level. So we're doing whatever we can to kind of work against this difficult Supreme Court.
Thank you. I'm already a member, have been for years.
Thank you. Yay.
And I recognize that there's no shortage on the demand for your funds in the litigation area. But I'm concerned about at least what I perceive from the public side as the lack of diversity in Americans United. To me, it looks like a Northeastern white organization, which is just a copy of our old colonial model. And the picture of the originators of American United, for example, were white. It seems to me that it would be very good, put some effort into recruiting members of the clergy, particularly of smaller denominations. Smaller denominations owe their existence to the separation of church and state, because when you have a state church, it tends to the corporate. The other thing is, I see no Asian representation in Americans United that I can see, and it shows up here, where we're in an area where there is a large Asian population, and the Asian portion of our population significantly comes from a non-Judeo-Christian background, as well as our South Asian population. I think the movement would be strengthened significantly by seeing if we can make some penetration into those communities and have participation from those communities.
Could not agree more. Our staff has certainly diversified in the past decade or so. I want to assure you about that, and it's really important. We have our union, in fact. I'm on the board of our union, so that is really important to all of us at Americans United. And, you know, you may not know all that happens behind the scenes. We do have, yes, I encourage you to look at some of our videos from our Summit for Religious Freedom we had last year. We have it again upcoming. And I think you might be hopefully surprised, pleasantly surprised on what you see, but I fully agree that it's crucial that we have as much diversity as we can within our movement, because, you know, we can't achieve what we want without it. Everyone needs to have a seat at the table.
All right, and I had two questions, though one of them was very similar to that one, which is, are you doing any kind of outreach to other religious denominations, Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, etc., to bring them to the table, because they obviously have a very vested interest in supporting and promoting what you're trying to do?
Yes. So again, like I mentioned, we have 2 pastors on staff. We have a Faith Leaders United program that works with people from all religious backgrounds to make sure everyone's voices are heard. You know, it's definitely an effort that has ramped up a lot from my understanding in the recent years. And my colleague, Elisa, she's actually out on maternity leave. She's one of our pastors, and she's doing excellent work to really make sure we're hearing from everyone, because it's very important.
All right, and my other question is, given the efforts to move funding to private vouchers, have you reached out to local school boards to talk to them about doing things to support, whether it's just through advocacy or education? You know, I know our local school district is seriously funding challenged right now. And if they're moving $10 billion to private voucher systems, that's obviously going to have an impact on everybody.
Yes, we work, public education is one of our strongest issues, I would say. We work a lot with local school boards, and we have a lot of, you know, as I mentioned, you can report a violation on our website. A lot of those violations come in, you know, that have to do with school boards. So our policy team is outstanding, and they are doing everything they can. Great question.
Given your comments about the Federalist Society, and the fact that they have put 6 Supreme Court justices on the court who are Catholic, which is potentially irrelevant. Does Americans United have any say or testimony when Supreme Court justices come about? Are they able to interject some, concern about the religious views of these candidates? I know it's a non-religious position, but the reality is religion does impact.
Another great question. Not that I am aware of. I don't believe that's a part of our work. As I mentioned earlier, we have grown a lot in the last few years, so I really see our movement and our impact only growing from here. That may include things like that. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not super equipped to answer that question, but I'm happy to ask my amazing lawyer colleagues and perhaps get back to you with a more concrete answer, because it's a good question.
Other questions?
I have a question. So you're encouraging us to send an email of concern regarding religious, separation of church and state. How do you filter out all those emails, and what is the process on investigating concerns?
From our report of violation, our legal team investigates every single violation report that we receive. From my understanding, from there, we determine whether we are able to take action or not. And as I mentioned earlier, so many times we are able to send a kind of, I don't know if this is the right term, but a sort of cease and desist letter, to stop that religious coercion in its tracks. But that would be a great question for our legal team on how they filter, but I know every single one is looked through. And when we can do something, we will.
I have a question. And this is about reporting also. So it is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's illegal for a preacher at the pulpit to start talking about politics and telling people in their congregation who to vote for or what to vote for or who to influence or whatever. So these are violations that are reported to Americans United?
When applicable, yes. We have, all different kinds of violations. From my understanding, that is one of them. The law is tricky sometimes. There are, loopholes occasionally that can be found, but again, wherever we can, when it is a blatant violation of church-state separation, we, take legal action on it.
We're kind of coming to the end of the program now, and I wanted to leave you with a good story. Most of you are familiar with Sunol, and there's only one school there, and our kids went there. There was a silent assault by a religious group trying to take over the school board. Only 3 members. So, some of you probably remember some of the details. They got 2 people elected, and then there was a revolt because they tried to take down the pride flag and do some other stuff and insert some other stuff into the curriculum. There was a recall election, and they were both recalled, and some good folks were put back on. So your organization is great, but it can be done on a small basis too, locally, if you know the rules and you have a dedicated group. It was terribly painful for the community, because there are only about 900 people there in Sunol. But it worked because people wouldn't stand for discrimination. It's as simple as that. And being told what to do by one group or one religious viewpoint. So your group is important, but it's also important to keep your eyes open in smaller situations, and it can work, and it has worked. So, have hope.
Okay, Judy.
My question is,
I'm aware of the fact that legal action is expensive, okay? And you're doing an awful lot of that. I've joined all kinds of environmental groups and other groups that are suing, okay? But people like me, I can't imagine how you can get that much money. So my question is, not entirely facetious, but do you have some millionaires and billionaires supporting you?
I am on the low dollar grassroots side of fundraising. So we have a really talented major gifts team that is kind of the other part of fundraising. But my role is to recruit people like you and me and help us understand that $20 here and there like really does add up and make a difference. We have the numbers to prove it. I mean, the side of my program within development has skyrocketed in the last few years, and that money is what is fueling our litigation. It is people like you and me. You know, our major gifts team works with, you know, those who have higher funds, but rest assured that we're giving them a run for their money. Yeah, literally. Yes. Yeah.
Other questions?
This is the last question. Do you know anything about Moms for Liberty and how that is faring, and how much money they have in their war chest compared to your own, or whatever?
Yes. Yes. Our team, you know, discusses that. Yeah. I'm not sure what. Yes, we know about them, of course. We try to do everything we can to stay informed about those kinds of groups, how they're being funded. But, you know, like I went over in my presentation, you know, these Christian nationalists work through so many different lenses to develop this type of funding to groups like that. So it's so important that we have groups like ours, our allies, to fight back. Mm-hmm. Like I mentioned, I'm on the low dollar side of our fundraising program. I think grassroots is really, really important. That would be a question for our major gifts team. Yeah, I think what matters the most to me is that everyone in this room, people like us, can make a difference. Yes.
One last question over here. You mentioned Project 2025. Does your website happen to have a distillation of what is in that? Because 900 pages is just, I mean, separating the wheat from the chaff is, you know, that's just an incredible amount of work.
We sure do. It could even be au.org/project 2025. It's a part of our website. And we, even before the 2024 election, we were sounding the alarms about Project 2025 because everything that happened last year is happening now was quite literally written out. So a big part of our work is to spread awareness, you know, like you mentioned, with knowing your rights that you can push back within school boards. That's a big part of our work. It's not just policy litigation, it's awareness. So yes, we have a lot of information about Project 2025 on our website, as well as what we call the shadow network, which is a lot of these Christian nationalists within our government, within influential positions. We name them, we call out what they're doing, and it's, again, a big part of our work to spread that awareness, to learn about who's pulling the strings to manipulate our laws.
Okay, I have a question. What is the biggest thing that you wish everyday people knew about Americans United?
Great question. No. Well, yes. My job says yes. I think that we exist. You know, we're still building our awareness. You know, I was unfamiliar with the organization years before I started, and you know, looking at the key areas of our work, you know, when I joined the organization, I was like, I can't believe I haven't heard of this group where they're fighting for so many things that I care about. And I just had no idea that church-state separation is what connected so many of those dots. And when taking away fundamental freedoms, it's usually used, the justification is religious reasons. So it was a big wake-up call to me, and I wish that more American citizens, and not everyone, all of Americans understood, kind of those dots are so connected. And I think our organization does a good job at showcasing that.
Saida.
Apparently I read somewhere that people in the U.S. are becoming sort of less religious, and yet the evangelical churches seem to be getting more and more members, which I thought was interesting. But my question is, do you also work with like the ACLU or other organizations, basically see if your legal dollars can go further?
Absolutely. I even have an answer to this question ready from our team. We love working together with other organizations who have the same goal. We firmly believe we are all stronger together. We frequently partner with the ACLU, with Democracy Forward, and many local organizations within our state level lawsuits. So we are 100% in the let's all join together because we can have more of an impact that way. So any chance we can, we collaborate.
Are there questions? From religion?
No, not that I am aware of. I actually have a lot of colleagues that came from the Freedom for Religion Foundation, so I'm honestly not sure. So I don't want to give you an incorrect answer.
Okay.
I have some stickers in the back if you'd like any. I have some pamphlets, some magazines if anyone's interested in looking at Church and State, our magazine. So feel free to take a look.
You've totally enlightened every one of us, including me, very much. And I want to thank you very much. We have a little gift for you. Yeah. It's some Suju's coffee. And I also want to let everybody know that in addition to the literature that Camille has brought, I'm going to look at that and take some things, look at it at home. We also have League of Women Voters literature. And today we have two people that if you're not a member of the League of Women Voters, we have two people that will sign you up to be members right here and now today. So think about that. And thank you very much for coming. Okay, the other thing that I'm just remembering, we usually have a program once a month, but in April we are taking a break. We're not having a program. In May, our next program, it will be the first Saturday in May, and I can't remember the date. We're going to have somebody talking about the intersection between anti-Semitism and democracy. So you'll want to be here for that. Okay? Thank you so much.